Skywatchers Radio.
Greetings and salutations, fellow Skywatchers from all corners of the globe. We're back live once again on this beautiful July 16th, 2014. Depending on where you are, though. And joining us tonight, we have a very, very cool guest, a very special guest. His name is Ted Peters. And Ted Peters, the author, Ted Peters, who just wrote a really cool book called UFOs, God's Chariots, and we're going to talk to him about that book and about all kinds of different things. If you're hearing a little crickling sound, that's my co-host Alan, who is... Where are you tonight, and why are we clicking?
I honestly don't know why we're clicking. It's probably the dang blankety blankety bleepity bleepity hotel that I'm in, throttling my bandwidth, which is sometimes something I cannot control.
Now, what part of the globe are you joining us tonight from, Alan?
I am in the middle of somewhere in Florida in Podunktown, Nowhereville, which means I'll probably see Farmer Jim abducted by aliens tonight, and they're going to use a tractor beam on him. And you know how Farmer Bill is going to know they use a tractor beam on him?
I'm afraid to find out the answer to this one, oh boy.
Because it says John Deere on the UFO.
Anyway, folks, tonight, if you want to join in on the conversation, the third segment of the show, we will have open lines, and we'll take your calls, 786-245-8127. Please, we'd love to hear from you. And, of course, we have open lines during the first segment of the show also, so if you guys want to call in and complain about the clicking, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to ask any questions, you can go ahead and do that. Also, we do have some Skywatchers radio report news to get through and get to. A couple of news items that came our way this week from our good friends over at Open Minds Radio. It says, it's funny because every time I want to read anything interesting when it comes to UFOs, that's like the number one destination on the planet. Number one spot.
Is that supposed to be a joke? Number one place on the planet?
Yes. It's a good joke. Better than yours.
Okay, you win. Yeah,
it is. Now, it says here, space aliens walk among us. Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Space aliens walk
yeah, absolutely. I believe that. Sure, yeah.
And Indeed claims retired Temple professor, and it says here, let me see, retired Temple professor David Jacob in his Windor home claimed that he sees aliens, or as he sees it, aliens are from outer space, right? We kind of know that.
Yeah,
and
we figured that.
Yeah, it says the aliens that are from outer space have been kidnapping humans for eons and sexually molesting them to create some sort of human-alien hybrid that walk among us today, undetected. And soon will take over the Earth, apparently.
Plausible.
Yeah. Now, this might sound a little crazy to the normal folks, but hear me out here. It says here, long ago, quite caring what took people to think of him. He stopped caring about what people thought of him, I should say. As director of the International Center of Abduction Research, Jacobs, who's 71, has made his life's mission to investigate claims of extraterrestrial abduction. He says here, what I'm doing will either be an interesting but non-essential footnote to the popular culture or the most important thing that's ever happened to humankind. Pretty important. I don't know, what do you think? More important than the toilet paper? Alan? Yeah.
Yeah, I think toilet paper wins for humankind.
I think so too. Now it says here, I see it as the latter. So I guess he sees it more important as toilet paper. I said, Mr. Jacobs, now, who's now working on the fifth book, tentatively titled The New People? And that's going to be out pretty soon, I'm pretty sure. And you'll see him all over the radio and all over the internet.
If I see him all over the radio, that's going to be a really, really cheap radio I'm going to buy.
Metaphorically speaking, Alan. And there goes the clicking. Dude. Okay, well, clicking be gone. I'm sorry, I can't deal with the clicking right now. So We'll talk to Alan a little bit later. But anyway, while most people might write off UFO believers as deluded conspiracy theorists, kooks, Jacobs isn't your typical believer. Says here he was a tenured professor at a Temple University where he taught American history for 36 years before retiring in 2011. He's a married father of two who lives in a picturesque 134-year-old Victorian just over the Philadelphia line. And it says here he makes his case with well-reasoned, articulate explanation and applies a scholarly approach to his research, which he has shared in 4 books. So he's written a few books, folks. This is not a brand new author to the scene. And 4 books. I've barely read that many books, but he's written 4 of them, and they've been printed and they're well known in the academic publishers circle. Jacobs has interviewed about 150 people who say they've been abducted by aliens, the forgotten details of their cosmic kidnappings resurfacing in relaxation sessions, and really you're sitting on a bed telling your stories. That's pretty relaxing. I wonder if there's any medication involved. Anyway, the self-taught hypnosis doctor does this in his own home, right? Saves a lot of money on a practice. Just do it out of your house. Citing public polls, he estimates that aliens have abducted more than 1 million Americans. How's that for a number? 1 million Americans. I'm going to ask Ted about that, what he thinks about that. I think it's probably a little bit more than that. I'm just, I'm just speculating here. I think by now we've had a little bit more than 1 million Americans abducted, or at least that we know of. Maybe 1 million, but I'm pretty sure it goes over a few million. In America, only in the last 300 years. I'm pretty sure there's been more than 1 million Americans abducted and mutilated. Maybe not all by aliens, though. The government may be doing some of that stuff. You never know. Remember when I talked to Travis? You guys go back in my archive and check out the show I did with Travis Walton. We kind of hit off on a nice point dealing with his abduction scenario. And part of the stuff that we talked about was that perhaps he walked in on a government-sanctioned project. And there could be that possibility that, aliens are a misdirection, a decoy for some kind of government conspiracy, some kind of government project. Now, Jacobs has interviewed about 150 people who say they've been abducted by aliens, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of folks. But how many of them are actually telling the truth, though, guys? Really, I mean, let's be sincere. How many of those so-called abductees are not kind of, but anyway, says here, citing public polls, he estimates that again that over 1 million Americans have been abducted. And I call bat squash on that. I think it's much more that have been abducted, and a lot of them don't even make the press. They don't, I think a lot of the people that do come forward with, maybe not all of them, but a good percentage of the ones that do come forward are kind of hokey and making it up just to kind of fit in a group and be part of ufology in a sense. But it doesn't mean that all of them are like that. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that have been abducted who have come forward, and are actually legitimate abductees. Now, abductees independently report similar experiences and recall common details as here, such as the human-like or insect-like appearance of aliens. Of course, we all know about the grays or the big bug eyes. They look a lot like praying mantises. I mean, I don't know if anybody is familiar. I'm sure everybody's familiar with what a praying mantis looks like. To me, that's kind of what the grays always kind of resembled. And it would make sense maybe that on another planet some being would develop a big bulgy black eyes. I don't know. But many abductees told Jacobs that aliens started or stared deeply into their eyes, sometimes touching their forehead in a neurological scan that enabled them to harvest human sperm and egg. Ooh. Women frequently claimed that aliens impregnated them, removed the alien-human hybrid fetuses from their wombs, and forced the women to nurse the hybrid babies and even breastfeed them, probably. I don't know. People are physically absent during the time they say they were abducted, and obviously if you're going to be abducted, you're going to be absent from time, right? Time is going to be missing. So yeah, missing time is something that's very familiar in the abduction scenario. Jacob said some families even have reported loved ones missing or seen them vanish he added, and vanished like in thin air. Kind of like magic, like psh. Abductees sometimes are taken in groups. Strangers who have never met on Earth recall each other from their deep space experiences, Jacobs said. People return with unusual marks, injuries, or scars, including scar tissues that form overnight. Which, how the hell does that happen? A biological impossibility that he says here that he has seen himself. Now, for years, Jacobs shunned speaking locally about alien abductions. Shunned it. He didn't want nothing to do with it. He said, I knew that it was embarrassing to the university, he said, remembering one temple donor who threatened to end his charity unless Jacobs quit teaching his UFO class, the only one like it in the country, by the way. But he didn't quit. Still, his beliefs carried a cost. Tenured in 1981, he said he was twice rejected for promotion and never became a full-time professor at Temple. And he says, I was not rewarded for my views, Jacob said, but you do not often find yourself in the middle of a phenomenon like this that allows you to make a contribution to something that could be an unsurpassing importance in human history. Jacobs is among a small but supporting, it says here, a small but surprising array of well-known folks who reportedly believe in extraterrestrial life, including former U.S. President Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. Former astronaut Edgar Mitchell, of course, has come forward. We all know about Edgar Mitchell. Gordon Cooper has come forward as well. We all know that. Theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking and celebrity Mick Jagger, Dan Aykroyd, my favorite, and the greatest of all times, Muhammad Ali, have all reported as seeing aliens. Oh, and William Shatner, Captain Kirk himself, has seen aliens. Now, I find this kind of funny, though. Muhammad Ali, Ronald Reagan, senile, right? These guys had Alzheimer's. Reagan passed away. Muhammad Ali is still living, but in very bad shape. I don't think he remembers where he's at right now at any given moment. I mean, he is completely out of it, folks. But Dan Aykroyd, he's gone a little loonier over the time. What I'm trying to get at here is it's a very wide spectrum of celebrities are into this stuff, and people within the government like Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Edgar Mitchell, Gordon Cooper. Stephen Hawking, though, still has the best quote when it comes to aliens that I've ever seen somebody put out there, and it was about how we should be careful with making contact with aliens or sending out signals that attract aliens because, well, they could be hostile. And last time, somebody landed on this land here in the U.S. that was from outside the U.S. and landed here for the very first time. Well, it didn't work out too well for the natives. That was his theory. And of course, we don't want to see that on a galactic scale. The worst thing I think that could happen, though, is if we do get that White House lawn, that landing on the lawn, and it turns out that once the ship opens up and the aliens are starting to walk out and all the smoke comes out, because, it has to be like Hollywood, right? You have to have a little smoke coming out and little aliens coming out first, and then you see the bigger aliens. And they all look like 6'8" or 7'5" or 8 foot tall Native Americans. That would be the end, I think, of America. I mean, it was a nice run. So I might as well just end it right there, I guess. I don't know. But interesting article. Look, if you guys want to read along, like always, we have this posted over on our Skywatchers Radio Facebook page at facebook.com /Skywatchers Radio. You can check that out every week. We post a lot of news in there, especially when we're doing live shows like tonight. That is a live show. And with this great website that is Facebook, you can always keep up to date with what we're putting on here. And another story from, and actually this got me a little sidetracked, so I paused there for a second because it was freezing my browser. But this has a video that I want everybody to watch. It's really funny. It really is. Just don't watch it now. Just follow along with the story. This is from Open Minds also. Officially now we know Area 51 is real, right? Officially, it's no longer a secret. President Obama even uttered the words Area 51. It's an official place. Now, as a lot of folks know, their tours, they go all the way to the edge of the desert where Area 51 begins, and then you see the trucks showing up and all that stuff, and they'll stop you if you cross that line. Well, a tour bus accidentally crossed the line and drove into Area 51, and it didn't end pretty well for them. It says here, tourists in Nevada recently got more than they were bargaining for when their tour guide accidentally passed the no trespassing sign and drove into Area 51. They were quickly tailed by security trucks and asked to get out of the van immediately. The tour then got much less fun. The whole thing was caught on camera, which is really funny. You can actually see the reaction when they were being pulled over. The story was featured on KLAS TV's 8 News Now as an I-team investigation and presented by the veteran reporter, the great George Knapp. Knapp is credited, of course, for putting Area 51 on the map, so who better to tell a story like this, right? When he covered the story back in 1989, and an alleged whistleblower at the time, Mr. You-know-who, Bob Lazar, who supposedly worked at the super-secret, unacknowledged base at the time, now everybody knows it's there, the man said that he worked on back engineering alien technology. Now, it's funny that now we do have full acknowledgement the base is there. Is that a possible step towards disclosure? I don't know. There's an audio I'm going to play later on for an air show, but there's a very funny audio to this. I don't have the audio clip because it's not really for radio, but it is very funny. You guys should definitely watch the video. The reaction of the driver is priceless. Priceless. The reaction of everybody is priceless. Now, they all got charged with trespassing. They all got cited for this thing, which is crazy. You think about it. You're on a tour. You pay to see whatever, wherever the tour goes, and all of a sudden you're going near Area 51. It's not something you expect, obviously, but to cross that line, they weren't expecting that. And when you see what happens, it's clearly a mistake. It's not like they were doing it on purpose or anything like that. The funny thing is that it was all recorded. Everything was recorded, both on. It was recorded, of course, by the cam inside the tour bus. It was recording the entire conversation, everything pointed at the driver and pointed at the other people, the passengers. But there was also a camera pointed in the back of the car, and in the front of the car that was taking shots, from both directions, I guess, to see if they see the trucks or whatever. And it says here, ever since tourists have been flocking the base, which all at once has been the most secret and well-known, as perhaps the most famous U.S. Air Force installation, the tour van that crossed the line from the Aventura Photo Tours co-owner Donna Tryon told KLAS that some of the tourists are just curious. They don't really know what it's about. Others believe they have been abducted, and others believe they're actually aliens, and they want to go back out there to hopefully go back home. She says we get all kinds of people. Tryon says that their Area 51 tour includes a lot of stops that have become famous in the area, but the spots most people want to see, of course, is the Keep Out sign that says their drivers are very careful not to pass that sign, and they warn the passengers that you can never go over the line, man. Do not step over the line because you're going to get shot. Anyway, now, this is a very famous line, very famous sign. If you guys go to Google, type in Keep Out Area 51, you'll see the sign. Very famous. Now, it says here, although Tryon says that her driver or drivers are very careful, there are bound to be mistakes in any business. Obviously, nobody's perfect, right? Now, when your business is, of course, taking people to the edge of a top-secret military facility, the mistakes that one makes may be a little bit more interesting than in other cases. While cruising down the dirt road, like I said, leading to Area 51, Dennis Ryan is the driver's name of the tour van, was distracted by questions about sports, of all things. Wasn't even dealing with aliens, which is funny. You could see it in the video. He's like looking all around, and the camera's picking everything up, including directly at the signs, right? So you could see when the signs are being picked up, but he's not even looking towards the sign, so he completely misses it. And he's really just distracted by the questions. And they're talking about sports. Not even aliens. That's the comedy here. Is the funniest thing. He says he missed the warning sign, and a minute or two later, the passengers noticed that they were being followed by a white truck, and O.J. Simpson was nowhere to be found. Wasn't the juice. This was not the juice, okay? And anyway, he was being followed by a white truck, and he says the whole time the cameras were running, like I said, inside the van. The tourists thought that this was all part of the show. They thought it was all part of the tour. And boy, were they surprised. However, Ryan can be heard saying, "Oh, man, I apologize for this. Those are the men in black." Dun, dun, dun. The tourists were right to think they were experiencing something other than the normal, but unfortunately, it was not planned, and it was not a planned added bonus to their tour. Area 51 has an agreement with Lincoln County. They handle the trespassing cases, so the tourist group had to wait for the Lincoln County deputies. Once they arrived, the passengers and the driver were all cited for trespassing, and they were given court dates. Even the people inside even the tourists, the passengers, were given court dates for this thing, and they were cited. Now check this out: the tourists, a couple from the UK, a mother and a son from the East Coast, were no longer having a good time this year, no kidding, when they were facing a fine of $650 per person. And not only that, this is the worst tour ever, buddy. Not only is it $650 per person, the fine, they also had misdemeanor convictions added to them. So they turned tourists into criminals. How funny is this? Now, says here, Will Treon, the driver and the owner and another co-owner of the amazing photo tour, said, "We were afraid they would issue a bench warrant for these people." My God, turn good normal tourists into criminals. That's what they're doing here. Lincoln County District Attorney Dan Hogus did not believe the incident was an accident. Of course not. He thought that the group was in cahoots to see what would happen if they crossed the sign. Luckily, when KLAS contacted the DA to ask him about the case, they let him in on the fact that the whole thing was kind of video recorded. Upon viewing the video, the DA recognized that the expression on the face of the driver was shock, not someone making mischief. The charges were then dropped for all but the driver, who is now barred from Area 51 tours for at least 2 years. So yeah, he ain't going to be making that mistake again, folks. That's the last time that guy drives around there making that mistake. He should do like tours around sports athletes' homes. Huh? I mean, he likes sports, obviously. The one condition the DA did require, though, for dropping the charges on the passengers was that the forward-facing video on the tour van not be made public. Interesting, right? Knapp clarifies that this was because the cameras caught security trucks coming from inside the base. He says, for the record, there were no shots of flying saucers or secret aircrafts in that video. Do you believe him? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't think there's any spacecrafts in the video, but it's still a very funny story. And again, openminds.tv if you guys want to read that article, or you can just go to our website on Facebook, facebook.com/Skywatchers Radio, and check that out. Check the page there. I'm going to go through one more story, and then we're going to hit the commercial breaks and get our guest, Mr. Peters, on. Can't wait to talk to him. Awesome book, by the way. Actually, this is something I really wanted to get to. It's a convention that's going to be held. And everybody who's obviously into ufology are going to want to go to this thing. A weekend of exploration into extraterrestrial life. Ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, UFO sightings, contact experiences, and the need to know.
Yeah, man.
Now, Contact in the Desert will explore UFOs, ancient aliens, and much more. The Contact in the Desert conference. No, that's my phone there. Let me turn that off. Sorry about that. Conference is returning to the Joshua Tree in California. It says this year will mark the second year for the event, which takes place at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center. Contact in the Desert is a 3-day-long conference that features several lecturers on extraterrestrial-related topics. Event organizer Paul Andrews claims that the registration for this year's event have more than doubled from last year's registrations. That's pretty good, right? That means people are interested in the subject. Yeah. Now, Los Angeles Daily News reports that according to Andrews, the event's popularity can be attributed to mainly to the popularity of television shows like, History Channel's Ancient Aliens with my favorite weirdo with the hair, Georgia Tukulus, and of course, Art Bell and many other people that are over the years have introduced the alien themes and topics to the world, and other people that are going to be there, which I don't want to name by name. You know who I'm talking about, the guy with the stash. Open Minds Alejandro Rojas will also be present at the lecture this year and at the year's event, so that's good. This is some of the names that are going to be there. Check this out. Sorry, I had to cough there for a second. Stash Squatch is going to be there. Stash. Crazy Hair Georgia Tukulus is going to be there. Hey, speaking of people that make stuff up, Eric Van Daniken is going to be there. Stephen Greer and David Wilcock will all be there. All right. So in other words, it's going to be all fiction, folks. Well, Alejandro Rojas is pretty cool. Michael Tellinger, he's actually pretty good. Jim Mars, Nick Pope, he's awesome. David Sarita, he's cool. Jason Martell, Aces. John Anthony West, Linda Moulton Howe, David Jacob, and Richard Dolan is going to be there also. So if you guys want to check that out, make your way over to the conference. This is here. Let me see. It's going to be held in August 8th through the 11th. And it's at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center once again. And it says here, Andrews believes the conference has a broad appeal because the whole UFO question is a huge mystery to the American public. And the people want to solve that mystery. They need to know. He also believes that Joshua Tree is the perfect location to host the event because the region has a long history of reported UFO sightings. The second annual Contact in the Desert Conference takes place August 8th through the 11th. Like I said, for more information, please visit contactinthedesert.com, and you can also check that out on openminds.tv. Now, guys, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. Before we go to commercial break, though, there's one more thing that I wanted to get to, and I'm going to play this audio piece. This is from an air show. Really funny stuff, and this was reported all over the place as real UFOs. And it wasn't. Check out the article again on facebook.com/Skywatchers Radio. Vancouver UFOs, actually a terrestrial stunt. A pair of unidentified flying objects spotted in the skies over British Columbia have been identified, and they are absolutely from this very planet. Social media lit up on Sunday night with the videos and photos of a pair of dodging, weaving ribbons of flame in the sky over the English Bay. In Vancouver, some suggested they were UFOs, but a stunt airplane company has admitted to being the force of the unexplained lights. We're going to hit commercial breaks. When we come back with Ted Peters. All right, everybody, we're back on Skywatchers Radio on PSN Radio and, of course, Dark Matter Radio Network. And we got our guest of the evening with us, Mr. Ted Peters. But before we go in and get to the guest, I want to issue a quick apology to Jeff Willis, because there was a little confusion on the scheduling, and he's actually supposed to be on next week on the show, and I had kind of confirmed by accident that he was going to be on this week. So sorry, Jeff. We love Jeff Willis on the show, and he will be on with us next week here on Skywatchers Radio. So quick apologies to Jeff for the confusion. But now on to the show, guys. Again, if you want to call in, 786-245-8127. And please keep your calls for the last segment of the show. We have our guest, Ted Peters, on, the author of the book, UFOs, God's Chariots, Spirituality, Ancient Aliens, and Religion, Yearning in the Age of Extra-terrestrials. Ted, welcome to Skywatchers Radio, my friend. How are you doing tonight?
It's good to be with you, watching the sky, watching for dark matter. That's exciting.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network. Coincidental?
So how do you skywatch for dark matter? What kind of
if you're looking for dark
you're looking
matter and a flying saucer appears right in front of it, then you've got real excitement, don't you?
I can't wait to see that without using Photoshop.
Good point. Yeah.
Do I hear a note of skepticism?
And I'm not a skeptic. I do believe, but when something doesn't sound right to me, I'm going to call Bat Squatch. I'm going to say, please explain that or break it down for me because something doesn't sound right with it.
It sounds like you like evidence, right?
There are some things I'll take on faith, some things I'll take on evidence.
A religious man he is not, by the way, Ted.
Well, yes, I am. Sure, I am.
It's possible to be religious and also like evidence. I think that they can kind of go together.
I agree. Now,
Well, religion and spirituality are also two totally different things. And are we talking about organized religion when it comes to these topics as well?
When I deal with the UFO phenomenon, I'm really dealing with spiritual sensibilities, not necessarily organized religion. And I do think that certain sensibilities that simply belong to the human race and have been there in our culture for millennia actually come to expression in our own day, even in the secular culture. So you don't need to have an organized religion in order to think religiously or spiritually.
Yeah, but the way the world is
That's interesting,
right now, seriously, the way the world is right now, eons of spirituality is not translating to how people are dealing with the world around them.
Well, I fear that unfortunately it is translating, but it's coming out in disguised form. So Vladimir Putin wants to conquer foreign countries. Why? Well, he wants to defend high moral standards in the Orthodox Church of Russia. So it's a very disguised form, but it's alive and well, and I think it's alive and well in the UFO phenomenon as well, but it's simply disguised, camouflaged. The names have changed, but classic ancient religious desires for salvation, perfection, eternity, all of these things come to expression in the UFO phenomenon, just as it does in many other departments of secular life.
All right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now let's go back here. With UFOs and spirituality and religion, how far back do you date the first recollection of something that can be considered UFO based in historical records when it comes to religion? Like, what's the furthest record that I guess you researched that you can say, this could be UFOs, what they're talking about here?
Well, I like to deal with the UFO phenomenon as a package, and
It's a big package.
As a package, and I just start with June of 1947 and work down to the present time. Oh, yes, one can go back and retrieve earlier accounts of things and then try to sweep it in. But there's been a consistent pattern since 1947 that really belongs to our post-World War II culture. Themes such as why science is more important than politics, or why is it that we human beings on Earth cannot settle our political problems, and why we can't have peace on Earth. And these are, I call them religious or spiritual themes that press their way all the way through the phenomenon. And so I don't just ask the question, are they real? Or are they just kooks, nuts, and wackos that see UFOs? But I want to see, what does this represent in our culture, and why does the mystery of flying saucers take the form that it does? So those who do ancient astronaut theories are actually very modern people who go back to ancient documents and ancient archaeology and reinterpret everything. So there's really nothing there in the ancient world. It's really a projection of very modern people with technological minds who go back to the ancient world and just change everything in light of their way of looking at things.
Ted, that's the perfect answer that I was looking for, my friend. Let me tell you, because that's exactly what happens. And look, shows like Ancient Aliens they're entertaining, but it's not very factual when you actually do your homework on some of the stuff they're talking about. Like,
well, why do you think they always say at the end, or when they're posing a question, could it be, maybe, possibly, aliens? There's no definitive proof there.
There is none. None at all.
But then again, there are things that are so totally unexplained without there being some type of an outside intervention. I mean,
some of the evidence that they raise, by they we mean the so-called ancient astronaut theorists that appear on the History 2 channel, and like you guys, I watch those shows too. They're really quite exciting and quite imaginative, but they'll ask, could it be aliens, about things that we already have a great deal of explanatory evidence for. We do not need aliens, for example, to explain how the pyramids of Egypt were built. We know how they were built because everything.
They told us. Egyptians told us.
That's right.
wait a minute. Hold on.
Wait
a minute. What's your decision making on how the pyramids were built?
Well,
their schematics and stuff that they left behind. I mean, they left.
In some cases, the architect and the contractor and their names are all listed there, and so also the methods for their construction. And if you take a look at the history of Egyptian pyramidology for a 1,000-year period, you'll see the first ones were kind of small and kind of clunky, actually, and over the centuries they learned how to do a better job. So by the time you get to the second millennium BC, they're quite masterful pieces of human achievement, to be sure, but it was a gradual step-by-step growth, and it doesn't take interstellar intervention to explain the construction of the pyramids, as marvelous as they are.
Hang on one second. What about the people that actually state that they have carbon dating and other evidence to prove that the pyramids were built much further back into history than second millennia BC?
Yeah, but that still doesn't mean it's aliens, Alan. I mean, just because it was built maybe a lot, further back, it doesn't mean that aliens came down and did it.
No. What I'm saying is that if you're having blueprints with the architect's name on it that are from second millennia, are those the people that were just refurbishing it or doing some extra work on it, which is why they had the blueprints and it was built even further back? Still haven't been able to explain how did they lift all that stonework all the way that high.
Well, there's actually explanations, but I'm sure Ted has a better answer for you than I do. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, they just, by the way, in the ancient world prior to the era of machines, they used animals and human beings for labor. You and I are so used to just pushing buttons and having machines do our work over the last couple centuries that we forget the role that slavery played.
Hold on. I might not be a religious person, but I'm Jewish. Don't talk. I know about the slavery thing because I got the whole Passover holiday every single year where we review it.
Well, your ancestors actually made bricks.
What do you mean it's our fault?
For the Egyptians out of sand and straw. And that's part of the Passover too, isn't it?
Actually, it doesn't say anywhere that we built the pyramids, but we did build, and we were slaves, and we did do things in Egypt. But in all honesty, funny as it is, there's really nowhere in the Bible where it says we did the pyramids.
No, most pyramids were constructed before the Hebrews became slaves in Egypt. Pharaoh Menes begins the whole process about 3,000 before the Common Era, and most of the big pyramids are constructed by 1800 or so BC when the Hebrews are enslaved. Oh yes, there were some pyramids built later, but no, we're not going to credit the Hebrews for doing that. The Egyptians built lots of things. Pyramids are only some of the things that they built. But I think one of the problems that I have with the ancient astronaut theorists is that they're not educated when it comes to garden variety anthropology or even theories of religion and how religious symbology works. One of the common themes amongst ancient human beings, which is still very much alive today, is the connection between heaven and earth. And we have that with shamans who fly to heaven and get secrets and come back. And so also placing retreats on mountaintops. And if you live in an area where there are no mountaintops, what do? Well, you build them. So on the plain of Shinar and the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for example, the ancient Babylonians and Assyrians, they built their mountains just as the Egyptians built their pyramids. And when you go to Central America, what do you get? More pyramids. And in the case of the Olmecs and the Mayans and the Toltecs, the top of the pyramid is where heaven and earth meet, and that's where religious rituals took place. It's not an issue of technology. It's an issue of how a culture holds itself together around religious meaning. And ancient astronaut theorists sort of fail to see this common human denominator as you move from culture to culture and millennium to millennium.
I don't think they fail to see, they just choose not to see.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you, Ted, let's go back a little bit here, a few decades, actually. There was a very famous person who's passed away recently, a few years ago, named Zecharia Sitchin.
Oh.
And Zecharia Sitchin wrote, of course, about the Anunnaki and about Samaria and all that stuff. What's your thoughts on Zecharia Sitchin?
Well, first of all, it's a case that Zecharia Sitchin, has a large number of disciples. People really like his work, etc. And I simply have to respect somebody who does the detailed research that he did. On the other hand, I cannot become a disciple. He has these rather weird theories about the mixture of DNA, for example, alien and terrestrial DNA, and he died in the period when the Human Genome Project was going on, and everybody was talking about DNA as being the essence of what makes a human being, and all of this kind of thing. So it appeared as though we really have some good science going here. But the Human Genome Project in the more recent decade has filled in a lot of gaps in our earlier knowledge about the simple evolution of human DNA and how it took place. There really isn't any room in there for a shot coming from outer space in order to tell the story of human development. So I tend not to agree with Sitchin and his disciples, and similarly with Rael and the Raelians on that particular story. Is it possible that Sitchin is right? Oh, I suppose it's plausible, but I really don't think that the evidence is in to give priority to Sitchin's explanation over those of your garden variety population geneticists.
I tend to agree 100%. In fact, my battle started with Sitchin a few years ago when I started researching the work of Michael Heiser. Are you familiar with his work?
I do not know his work, no.
He's a religious scholar. He took on Sitchin. There's a website called SitchinWasWrong.com or SitchinIsWrong.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he took him to task. I'm talking about he debunked him completely to the point that once you watch the documentaries this man put out, and you do your own research, which is the best part about the internet. You could go online and research it for yourself. Go to a library, do your own homework on this stuff. And once you do your own homework on the stuff that he's telling you to look at specifically, it's clear that Sitchin made up a lot. I mean, like you were saying earlier, he was just making stuff up left and right. If something didn't fit, he'll change it around and rearrange the meaning to fit what he wants.
Heiser up then, yeah.
Oh, this guy was epic, Ted. Epic. Now, Ted, let me ask you, have you yourself ever interviewed any UFO witnesses or anybody claiming to be abducted?
Yes, I have. I served for a number of years as an investigator for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, And
Yep.
I interviewed people claiming to have had UFO experiences of all different types, and that includes abduction experiences as well. And I did this primarily before the big change in the phenomenon in the late 1980s. I did have a chance to visit Charles Hickson, for example, in the Pascagoula, Mississippi case of 1973, and I've done some, but minimal interviewing of people who claim to be the hybrids. You were talking about David Jacobs and his work earlier in the program. I haven't duplicated the kind of work that Jacobs does, but I have, yes, talked with people who claim to be hybrids.
I'm sorry, if you claim to be a hybrid, I want a DNA test.
Well,
I also want a drug test as well, too, while you're at it, by the way.
Well, when I appreciated, frankly, the skeptical tone of your description of Jacob's work, because the hybrids that my wife and I have talked to, frankly, they look and behave just like us. I don't see anything unusual about them at all.
You know, it's funny because a lot of the hybrids, hybridization, the crystal children, star children, you know, all this new age stuff that's come around the block in the last 20 years, Ted. You know, a lot of these folks that are claiming they're aliens, but they're sent here to be born here as humans, but they're really from another galaxy. I mean, this kind of stuff is ridiculous. It really is. It's mind-boggling that people come up with this kind of nonsense. But it's amazing how so many people fall for it and so many people are interested in this stuff, isn't it?
It is, and what I try to do is to figure out why it is, even if it's ridiculous, why it is that we want to believe this to be true. And I think there is a yearning that's been around for a couple of millennia to connect heaven and earth. And also, your and my egos are constructed in such a way we'd like to feel important, frankly. And if you and I are connected with heaven and everybody else comes around and asks us to enunciate aphorisms of great wisdom, of course, we're going to feel important. And so to be a UFO abductee is actually to be a celebrity of some sort. But I still want to press the question, why this form? And I suggested that from 1947 to 1987, that 40-year period, most people who were abducted reported experiences that were either benign or neutral on the one hand, or actually salvific on the other, that these extraterrestrials were coming from a more highly advanced scientific and technological civilization, and that they would bring us all the goodies that science and technology could bring, including world peace. And there was basically, to my judgment, a religious structure, a spiritual structure to the phenomenon, just disguised in the language of politics and science. What happens in the late 1980s, and this is where David Jacobs comes into the picture, is you get these negative reports of abductions, almost where an earthling is abused, sexually abused, and then out of that comes the hybridization framework, etc. And one of the things I have to do in this book, UFOs, God's Chariots, is try to figure out what's the connection. Why is there a change?
There's been like an evolution in the phenomenon.
I think the change might be that it's not the same aliens that people were dealing with. It might be one.
I'll take care of it.
or maybe they elected a different president from wherever they're from.
Or better story writers.
And their policy changed, and, you know.
That's right. Yes, maybe on Zeta 2 Reticuli, the Republicans did win the election.
Or on the other hand, you know, on this world, maybe the deal that we had with them at the time didn't work out, and once Reagan was out of office, things changed.
Well,
that's
actually,
a possibility.
My theory is a little bit more complex, and people such as David Jacobs and others don't like me for this, but I think it was due to a cultural change.
Yeah.
And if you've got time to hear the
agree.
story, I'll tell you the story.
Oh, please!
I
I
think
agree.
we've
I
got
agree
time,
already.
yeah.
I agree
All right.
already with the first part of that
So
statement.
what's
Go ahead.
in common? All right. It's hypnotic regression. So if we go back to the beginning of this story, we're going back to the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case of 1961-62.
Right.
And if you may remember that Benjamin Simon, who was the psychiatrist in Boston who retrieved Betty and Barney Hill's forgotten memories, used hypnotic regression in order to obtain that. Well, after that very, highly visible case, UFO investigators started using hypnotic regression to retrieve data about abductions. And all through the 1970s, then you've got Leo Sprinkle and James Harder and others who are using hypnotic regression. And then something happens in 1980 that most ufologists simply ignore, and that is the publication of a book by a guy named Pazder called Michelle Remembers. And in this case, Pazder, the psychiatrist, uses hypnotic regression not to retrieve UFO data, but sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse. And this book gets widely read. By 1982, we begin a new phase in our culture, and that is the prosecution, you remember this, the prosecution of children's preschool and day school workers. You remember that? And by the time you get to the mid-1980s, over 100 cases in the U.S. Are accusing day school workers of sodomy, Satanism, child abuse, etc. And what is common is the use of hypnotic regression with the children to retrieve the accounts of abuse. The most expensive court case in Los Angeles County occurred during that time, and that was the McMartin preschool case from 1982 to 1987, in which the mother-daughter combo was accused of Satanism and sodomy, etc., and they were said, according to the children in hypnotic regression, that underneath the McMartin school was a cavernous basement where these rituals took place. Well, they dug down underneath, and of course there was no basement there, and so the McMartins were acquitted, and
But still guilty in the public eye.
The jury said they could see that the counselors using counseling techniques, including hypnotic regression, were leading the children. So it's at this time that suddenly the UFO phenomenon changes. And in New York, we have Bud Hopkins, we have David Jacobs, and Whitley Strieber, and a little bit later John Mack, who start coming out with a whole bunch of books now in which UFO abductions look like the McMartin preschool. So it appears to me that there's simply a cultural carryover, and the common denominator in all of it are people who use hypnotic regression to retrieve data of forgotten memories.
That makes perfect sense.
What do you think?
No, that makes perfect sense. It actually goes along. It goes along with my other theory that about the evolution of the phenomenon itself, how it's carried over thanks to introduction of certain themes within movies and media and stuff like that. Like the Greys, for example. Why did they become the popular choice of what aliens look like? Well, that has a lot to do with the movies that depicted the Greys.
Right,
That's where people get that from, right?
Yes, I think so. I can't actually date that. I do distinguish between science fiction and the UFO phenomenon. I think there are only two genuinely UFO movies. That's The Day the Earth Stood Still of 1951, not the second one, and Close Encounters.
Nobody cares about the second one, by the way.
That's right. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977.
Yes.
And the second one is where we get the Greys, but the Greys were actually appearing in the 1970s in the media for
Right.
non-blockbusters here and there. But I think that Spielberg finally nailed it down for us. After 1977, it's the Greys.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because it remained that way till now. It's still that way. And even a very famous abduction case, the 1970s case of Travis Walton, which in his book he goes into detail about how he saw a grayish looking aliens, but he also saw humanoid aliens, human looking aliens. And that was completely omitted from the movie. They just wanted to show the gray-looking and mean aliens or doing all kinds of weird experiments on them. That's really where Hollywood has gone with this thing. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why so many people are having bad abduction cases supposedly put out there. And they're having all these traumatic experiences. And I think a lot of that is led on by people who are doing hypnosis, just like you said. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It ties in perfectly.
You interviewed Travis Walton. Did he
I did.
Report to you whether he felt that the movie about him was accurate or inaccurate on this or related points?
Oh, my goodness. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
Ted, he was very, very animated about the fact that he completely hated the final cut of that movie.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, he loves the actors who are in it. He loves the writer, Tracy Torme. Did a fantastic job writing the original script. See, there's the thing that when he was first contacted to make that movie, there was a script that he was already outlining with Torme, and they came up with a concept to write the story the way it happened, or his details of the story anyway, and that's what they put on the script. For whatever reason, once the movie started in production, the studio said, well, you know what, we're going to take off the human-looking aliens. We don't want them. We're going to just go with the really mean aliens. And there's not going to be any of this stuff, that stuff, this over here. Just to remove all. Let's just make it really weird and creepy. In fact, even in the movie, if you watch the movie, the way he's dragged by the aliens in one of the scenes, that never happened. You can see him like searching around the ship, and there's like glasses floating and things floating around. None of that is real.
I think it's time for a reboot.
It is.
Yeah,
and he said that himself. He said that he's willing to do that.
I trust Tracy Torme. So, did you ask Torme? Did he feel like he was betrayed then by the final cut as well, or don't you know?
Completely. Like I said, he wants to recut that movie. And in fact, when I interviewed him, I said kind of jokingly, I was like, well, Travis, it's been so long. If you get those actors again, you're not going to be able to recut it properly because
you'd have to start over from scratch.
You'd have to start from scratch.
As I said before, I don't think that the other movies, even if they have flying saucers or aliens in them, are authentic to the phenomenon. I think you're kind of giving evidence of that because here you've got Travis Walton, who really belongs to the UFO phenomenon, and then you have a Hollywood interpretation that betrays it, because they want to sell movies, and so you don't really get a sense that UFO people, ufologists, don't think like science fiction people. They just don't. And to me, that's one of the nice things about ufology is that it is a distinct subculture, and the media partly gets it, but as in this case, it doesn't get it or doesn't want to get it.
Which I think that's what it is. I don't think it's that they don't want to get it. I think they just don't get it, period.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I don't think that there's so much they're not interested. I think they are interested. It's just they don't know what to do with the whole phenomenon. Yeah. And to be honest with you, Ted,
they don't know how to make money out of it. That's what.
That's not true. They know how to make money off of it. Believe me. Where there's a will, there's a way, and there's a will to make money off of ufology. But here's the thing: when you look and you sit back and you look at the overall spectrum of ufology, and this has happened to me, Ted, for the last 5-6 years since I've been doing radio and talking about these subjects and interviewing folks like yourself and folks in the UFO community, or ufology community, I should say. One thing becomes very apparent: not everybody's honest. Not everybody's telling the truth. Not everybody is. Not everybody is on the level with not only the information, but with, let's just say, not everybody is clicking on all cylinders, if you know what I'm saying. That's a sad statement, but it's a very true statement. And I think that's one of the reasons why the mainstream media still kind of treats the subject kind of like like a goofy subject because of that fact, because they know of the giggle factor within ufology, the hoaxers, and we can go down the list of people who I think are hoaxers. There's a ton of them. But not only that, people that are mistaking things randomly because they just don't know any better. For example, during the 70s and 80s, for a long period of time, Ted, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, many people reported UFO cases, or many UFO cases were reported, I should say. They were nothing more than misidentified objects. They were later discovered to be like the stealth bomber, our own government aircrafts.
Right.
And this is stuff that people were saying, oh, no, they're definitely aliens. And, I mean, how much of that stuff do you think MUFON got during the 60s and 70s and 80s? Tons. Tons of reports like that. Yeah, I mean, look, and I've had friends, Ted, who go skywatching, because that's what, I love skywatching. That's one of the reasons why we call the show Skywatchers Radio, because that, to me, it's a very important part of ufology. But I've had fellow skywatchers who tell me, yeah, man, I see UFOs all the time. Now, let's be honest. How many of us really go outside and see UFOs all the time, Ted? I mean, really?
Oh, yeah. I think
I mean, really?
the repeat reporters are, I agree. There's a good skepticism there, yeah.
And look, this is funny, and I have to bring this up. There's a ranch, and I'm not going to name the exact one, but there's a ranch, and you guys will know what I'm talking about because we talked about this recently on another show on Future Theater. And in this ranch, Ted, they have groups that come out to skywatch because supposedly the ranch, they could call on the aliens, and the aliens show up at their beck and call, right? The thing is, what people are seeing, and the person who I'm talking about kind of let it slip a little bit, what they're seeing are satellites. That's what they're viewing. That's another thing that people are mistaking for UFOs. Satellites. We have thousands of satellites in space.
Yeah, well, the UFO phenomenon is a big industry, and it's multi-layered, and there are a number of different vested interest groups. I don't mean that in a financial way, but in a kind of ideological way. I think the core, and perhaps this is my own selection, the core of, say, MUFON is made up of a group of people who have a scientific mindset. So they get a variety of reports. They want to investigate. They want to eliminate the IFOs, the identifiable flying objects, and get to that core that could be extraterrestrial. And some of them have PhDs in science, so their scientific approach is not at all unusual to them. But at the same time, there are lots of others who show up who have quite different agendas. I was at the UFO Congress in Scottsdale a couple months ago, and I met 2 or 3 reincarnation therapists and a couple shamans. And one shaman, a woman, very delightful woman, told me, well, she really likes these UFO meetings because there could be a wide variety of points of view, and nobody's ever critical of somebody else. And I thought, well, there's something kind of sweet about that. But it also tells you that the UFO phenomenon is sort of a bag of marbles, There's really quite a variety of things in there. And for my book, I tend to focus on this sort of core group, those who think of themselves as scientific, those who want to show on the basis of evidence that in fact Earth is being visited by extraterrestrials. And this is the group I find most interesting, and probably the group that my mind sort of dovetails with. I don't feel any need for reincarnation therapy, and but I do like the kind of UFO investigators. I do.
At the end of the day, do you think that the Earth is being visited on a regular basis? Do you think that's actually happening?
I am not convinced that is in fact the case. And it's not that we lack evidence, it's that we have too much evidence, and the evidence is not internally coherent is the problem. And I sympathize with Stanton Friedman and others who want to say, look, there's really good evidence that we are being visited by extraterrestrials. But then you got all kinds of stuff that's part of the UFO phenomenon that doesn't fit. I saw a movie one time taken by a farmer out in the field. He just plowed it and planted and everything, and was kind of being proud of himself. So he's just taking a film, and this classic circular flying saucer comes into the horizon. You think, oh, here we've got a spacecraft, and there are probably passengers in there from Zeta 2 Reticuli or something. Well, then suddenly this flying saucer starts to stretch out like bubble gum, and you get the thin thing in the middle, and then pop, and then suddenly you've got two flying saucers now, the same size as the first one, and they fly away in separate directions. Well, I want to say that doesn't look like a craft carrying passengers. It's something else. So here it is, and it's very much a part of the phenomenon, but it doesn't fit the extraterrestrial hypothesis model of craft visiting us. So I think there's a lot going on here, and even if I would hope the extraterrestrial hypothesis would be the case, boy, that just doesn't account for all the kind of data that we've got to deal with to explain.
No, I completely agree. A lot of the data, though, I mean, how much do you think is even really good data at this point with the way CGI and stuff? Because, I mean, really, any video that comes out is kind of like hokey at this point. I mean, can we take anything serious at this point with all the CGI stuff?
I've never seen a video in which I have a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Some of the early photos, like the Trent photos from Oregon, did pass all the tests. Even the Condon report stated that those were authentic. So there is some reliable data there. But no, you can't believe just everything that appears on YouTube. That's for sure.
No kidding. Now, how long have you been interested in the whole flying saucer phenomenon?
Well, unfortunately, I started as a kid. My mother and father were avid readers in the early days of the genre of UFO literature, and they actually went to hear UFO speakers such as George Adamski and others, and they would come home and talk, and I would read their books and stuff. So already in the 7th grade,
wow,
I was the local neighborhood expert on flying saucers. I never gave it up.
Have you become more skeptical over the years since you've been doing all this research?
Yes,
definitely you have, right?
For the reason I gave you is that there is just so much going on.
Yep.
And you can't put it all together into a single package. And we have not, despite, 60 plus years, you can't really point to something and say, you know what, this answers the question definitively. It's not there.
Yeah, no kidding. Area 51 was officially declared to be a real facility by the government recently. They officially announced it exists. Of course, we've known it exists since, forever now. Do you think there's anything going on in there extraterrestrial, or do you think it's just all smoke screens and smoke and mirrors?
It's gone by now. Whatever was there, I think they moved.
I like the story that you told earlier about the tourists. My wife and I have gone right up to the no trespassing sign, and we looked over, and it was all very exciting. There's no question that Area 51 has been around since perhaps 1955,
right?
As a test site for weapons, U-2 among other weapons. So the existence and the history of Area 51 in itself doesn't tell us anything about UFOs. So if there was a crashed UFO, would it have gone to Area 51? More than likely,
perhaps,
it would have gone to Area 51. Now, there's a museum in Las Vegas, which I've not visited yet, and but I plan on it. It's the history of atomic weapons. And there's an Area 51 exhibit, so it's going to become part of our public knowledge, I think, in the next months.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check that. I never heard of that place in Vegas. museum?
It's actually, I think, a branch of the Smithsonian.
Oh, nice. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah. I'm sorry I
the
don't have more
Smithsonian
details.
doesn't hide any. By the way, I got to admit, or got to comment, but the Smithsonian has never been known to hide actual facts about history. Is that correct?
I have no way of confirming or disconfirming that.
I have no clue, Alan. None.
Sorry, I was reading.
That's
an
a
article-
Google question. If anybody knows, please Google it up and let us know. Call in.
I was reading an
I have no
article this past week about the Smithsonian possibly covering up ancient Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon that had some serious legitimacy to it. And I'm just wondering if anybody has ever heard about that or commented on it or know anything about it.
Nope.
Not
No
with
idea.
me, sorry.
No idea. Ted, going back into religious aspects here with ufology, and we're going to hit a break in a few minutes, by the way, but I wanted to ask you real quick. You know, the Vatican has, I think it was last I heard it was maybe 5 miles worth of data records sealed in their vaults, you know, it's stuff that nobody's ever seen. Do you think there's stuff in there that deals at all with the alien phenomenon, or because I am a believer that we have been visited in the past at some point. Don't believe all the ancient astronaut stuff. I think a lot of that is bogus, and I don't believe it's accurate ascension. But I do think there's a case for maybe we've been visited at some point. Do you think there's anything the Vatican might know? Because recently the Vatican, not long ago, did say that, you know, aliens are part of God's plan, and they're coming really close to saying that aliens are real.
Well, I know some things about the Vatican, but not everything. I worked from 1987 to 2002 during the pontificate of John Paul II with the Vatican Observatory, and
okay.
John Paul II was very interested in the interaction between science and faith, and so I had a chance to meet him on a few occasions. And the Vatican Observatory has been around since a few generations after Galileo. I mean, after all, they got to take Galileo's telescope and search the skies.
Yep.
And since the Second World War, the Vatican Observatory is engaged in a considerable amount of serious scientific research on galaxy formation and related projects, and the topic of extraterrestrial intelligence is an everyday conversation. I mean, it's just normal. The Pope Francis I, about 3 weeks ago, gave a homily within the Vatican in which he used as an illustration, what if a flying saucer were to land and a Martian gets out and asked to be baptized, would we baptize the Martian? Well, Francis I, who has a PhD in chemistry, by the way, likes science, but this was part of his sense of humor because he's been working since his pontificate began to expand the horizon of Catholic believers. And about a year ago, he said, should atheists who have high-minded morality become partners with Catholics in making the world a better place? Yes, indeed. So I think of what he said about aliens or Martians fits that. Be that as it may, if you want to have a good conversation about this, talk with one of those Jesuits who's an astronomer for the Vatican Observatory. They've got a lot to say, and I don't know what they would say then about documents that are locked up and sealed and hidden. I'll bet you even Francis I has not read them.
Probably not. And that's crazy. 5 miles worth of documents.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what some of the stuff that's in there? I mean, geez. Crazy amount of documents in there. Listen, we're about to hit a commercial break, everybody. When we come back, we are going to have open lines. I want anybody who wants to call in, please do so. 786-245-8127 is the call-in number. Please call in and ask Ted any questions you have. Ted, this is a really fascinating conversation we're having, and thank you so much for being on here with us tonight. And hopefully we have some good questions for you from the audience.
Well, I'm enjoying it.
Guys, stick around. We're going to be right back on Skywatchers Radio. All right, everybody, we're back on the Dark Matter Radio Network and on PSN Radio. This is Skywatchers Radio with our guest of the evening, the author of the book UFOs, God's Chariots, Mr. Ted Peters, and we're having a really, really fascinating conversation with him. He has answered just about every question as perfectly as I would expect after reading this book, as perfectly as I think anybody could answer some of these questions. Because to be honest, Ted, by the way, it's very refreshing to have somebody out here say what you've been saying. The entire hour you've been on, just to hear somebody actually logically think about this stuff and not just believe all the nonsense that it's out there. It's just a breath of fresh air, to be honest with you. And if you guys listening want to get in on the conversation, please do so. 786-245-8127 is the call-in number. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure Ted would love to hear from you also. And by the way, you can also find us on Skype by looking up PSN Radio. So there's a lot of ways to get to us and find us on the show and ask us questions. We are taking your questions in chat room also. If you guys want to go there, psn-radio.com has a chat room. You'll see the link right on there. Check out the chat room. Ask away. We'll answer your questions. Back to Ted now, and back to this book. Ted, I wanted to ask you real quick, because this is something that's come up a lot. Not really so much on this show, but other shows that I've done, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Do you really think, and honestly, in your heart of hearts, do you think that NASA and SETI and scientists like that take the UFO phenomenon at all serious?
Well, before I answer that, let me thank you for using the word perfect so frequently. My wife Karen is listening to the show, and it wouldn't hurt for her to hear that. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't have to conjecture. I know a fair number of research scientists at both NASA and SETI. And apart from a few individuals here and there, by and large, it's clear they do not take the UFO phenomenon seriously at all. Mm-hmm. They tend even to shun people who are involved with ufology. And one of my concerns has been, I don't think that's necessary, because, as I mentioned, there are a number of people in MUFON and other UFO investigators who think of themselves really as being quite scientific, but your SETI and your NASA people think of themselves as having a patent on science. So in the summer, when they have their barbecues, the NASA and SETI people, they have their barbecue, and the UFO people, they have their barbecue, but they don't invite each other. And I just think that's where we are, and I do think that in the future, maybe they should invite each other, and I'd like to go to both.
How much of that do you think is by design, because they just want to not associate themselves with the UFO community? Or how much of that do you think is by the UFO community not wanting to involve themselves with NASA, so a lot of the hoaxers are now found out to be hoaxers, and maybe they're deliberately
it is
staying
the
away.
Case that a number of the scientists in SETI and NASA are aware of hoaxes and just plain hokiness and craziness, and they just don't want to be associated with it. And it's also the case, believe it or not, that a lot of funders want to think of themselves as being very serious about science. And so the greater the distance between NASA and SETI from the UFO phenomenon, actually, the better it is for funding. But I don't want to reduce it to that. There is some humor, and Stan Friedman usually is able to formulate this. He'll say, those SETI and NASA scientists think that every planet in the Milky Way is inhabited by intelligent creatures, but they're not visiting here. And, that's a great rhetorical device, but there is a little bit of nuts de cuckoo stuff going on, but I'm concerned about method, about assessment of evidence, about trying to get clear on what we know versus what we don't know. And there is a scientific, an authentic scientific mindset within the UFO phenomenon that should be just very much at home with SETI people and NASA people who are committed to the same principles for gaining knowledge.
Huh. I'm dumbfounded by SETI over the years. by the fact that they've spent so much money researching the skies and they've still not hit on any signal at all. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Well, NASA just made a
important to
statement the
observe
other
that, right?
day. Angel, I don't know if you saw the link that I sent you, but NASA made a statement clear as day the other day saying that they expect to find intelligent life within the next 20 years.
That's interesting.
Did you see the link that I sent you earlier?
No, I didn't have a chance. I was dealing with your technical issues, Alan. Sorry about that.
Okay, fine. Rub it in.
Yeah. Ted,
Well,
have you researched or heard about that?
There is no way that an estimate like that can make any empirical sense. I mean, and I'm not critical of SETI. I love SETI, and I love the scientists.
No, this was NASA itself.
Oh, this was NASA. Oh, I see. Okay.
And you want to know something? I'm skeptical as well, unless they already have the answer and they're going to wait that long to tell it.
No, that's not the case. At least not with SETI. SETI actually has a plan of information dissemination all in place should the big day come
Right.
when they get contact. I don't really know what NASA thinks about this, but right now, all we have, by that I mean we, is NASA and SETI, are big numbers. I mean, lots of stars, lots of planets, some of which are in the habitable zone. There is zero empirical evidence for even microbial life in our solar system, let alone intelligent life elsewhere in the Milky Way. So the movement from no knowledge to knowledge simply cannot be predicted, even though everyone is excited, rightly excited, that our knowledge about exoplanets is increasing almost daily. I'm excited about it.
It is exciting, but it's exciting to hear them talk about it. But again, they never. I mean, look, whether it's 20 years or 100 years, I hope I'm alive to be able to see them actually say they found something. But I think the first thing they're going to acknowledge is just microbial life of that. And Alan, I don't think that's too far away because I think there's probably already evidence on Mars of microbial.
Well, actually, you're
past
right
life.
about the Mars thing because they actually there's a discrepancy in the Mars research that I was looking into actually the other week. It turns out that there are two discrepancies. With the soil samples that were taken on Mars when the rover landed, scientists had said that there needs to be at least 300 parts per million of organic matter or bacterial matter to say there's life on Mars. The whole funny part is that they didn't find it. When they did the soil samples, there was at least 30 parts per million where they took the sample, not 300 parts per million, and that's only one sample that they took, and they haven't disclosed any other samples.
Right. Then there's always that. How long will they hold? Like you said, I mean, they might already know. How long will they hold that evidence?
Eventually,
That's the question.
yeah. I don't know. How well do we trust them?
That's the big question. How well do we trust them? You know, NASA's acronym, NASA, for a long time, the running joke has been that it stands for Never a Straight Answer. And it's really become, more than just a joke. It really is that. I mean, you never get a straight answer from these folks. It's always, well, maybe this, maybe that. But, I hope I'm alive, Ted, to see them, finally come out and say, you know what?
Well,
darn it, we found aliens or we found microbial life. I'm dying
I'm
for
with
that.
you on that one. And if you read the science journals, which I do quite regularly, one of the jokes is the discovery of water on Mars, because every couple months they announce they've finally discovered water on Mars. Well, they haven't, actually. The theory is there was once water on Mars.
Right.
But
there's ice at the
they
polar
haven't
caps. Is that
empirically
not water?
reconfirmed.
There's ice at the polar caps of Mars. Are you telling me that's not water?
Well,
Ted?
Well, that's not even a pun, is it? As far as I know, they haven't actually dug into the ice. So, and there is another theory as yet unexplored that there's water subsurface, and what they want to do is drill down deep enough in order to find that water. And if they do find water, could it be filled with microbial life? So, for your Mars experts, it seems to be like tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that.
The day after tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's funny though because Alan makes a good point though. There is, there is ice on the polar caps of Mars. It's scattered. It's not all over the place, but there have been images that show ice formations on the polar caps. Now,
and they recede and expand actually depending on the seasons.
Right. But here's the thing: how much how frustrating is it for everybody like us who are into these subjects to see them constantly land in places that are completely far away from the polar caps, where maybe there they could find the water. Why are they going in parts of Mars where they know there's nothing but desert?
Now that's an excellent question. You're a taxpayer. If I were you, I would,
I'm mad about that.
And tell them to land on a polar cap. That's a good idea. I mean,
that would answer the question. Is there ice? Is there water? Well, let's land where there might be some, because the pictures are saying there's ice there during the seasons. Well, let's go there and find out. Makes sense, right? Now, Ted, I don't know how much of Mars you've seen over the years of leaked images and stuff like that, but there's even areas of Mars that showed like vegetation on some images. Have you seen any of that stuff?
Oh yeah, that's Skip's site, right?
That's one of them. Yeah.
MarsAnomalies.com.
I have not. I have a colleague at NASA with whom I'm in continuing conversation. His name is Chris McKay, and he's a Mars expert. And whenever I need a little Mars fix, I say, "Hey, Chris, what's up?" Let me just say, those kinds of conversations I never hear. So my suspicion is that. We probably still have yet to find concrete evidence for the first time of microbial life on Mars. I don't think it's in, and I have never heard a credible scientist say that vegetation already exists there.
No scientist will touch it. I mean, these are images that will leak on but again, it's the internet, so how much of it is credible?
Oh, right.
Yeah, it is what it is. But, there's stuff that we have to look at anyway and dissect it. And I've seen some images, like the glass tunnels or the glass tubes on Mars. That's very interesting stuff. And that's been officially put out there by NASA. That's not like something that somebody just put out there.
There are plans more in the private sector than by NASA to colonize Mars, and they do have designs for what the first colonies will look like. And there's a NASA-sponsored laboratory in the desert of Arizona called Biosphere, in which the bubble that would be transferred first to the moon and then secondly to Mars is there. It's an ecologically internally complete life ecology there to support.
It's a full ecosystem.
Humanoids. Yeah, and so those that kind of research is just continuing. And yes, once we land on the moon and land on Mars, we'll drop down our bubble, our biosphere, and the human beings will live inside there until they can emigrate out.
Now, the Mars One mission, of course, I don't know if you're familiar with it. I don't know if that's where you're going with, but the Mars One mission, they had 200,000 people sign up for this thing at one point?
Oh, yes, for a one-way trip.
How crazy is that, Ted?
If only I could get my mother-in-law to sign up.
We all wish that, Ted.
That's just so wrong. It's funny.
Mother-in-laws.
No, but I mean, how crazy is that? I mean, look, we were talking about earlier about how the media in movies and stuff has made this stuff mainstream.
I think we need to ask again about human nature, because even though I don't know the Mars One people, I do know the Mars Society people, and they have a strong sense of manifest destiny. In fact, they even use that term, and they even use the term Promethean. So they want to define human nature as being driven by a force to explore and go new places. And just as Europe wanted to expand to the new worlds, so also does the human race want to expand to the other planets.
Right.
And so the Mars Society collects this kind of enthusiastic, exploratory people. So there's an issue of the human spirit here, and I think we all recognize it. It's usually you don't find a whole room full of people believing in manifest destiny, but the Mars Society gets them all together in the hundreds.
It's amazing, yeah.
So I can understand why you would have that many people sign up. I genuinely do. I don't want to make that trip, but I can understand why others would. Yeah.
I mean, it's a one-way trip, but let's just say it's a one-way trip, but you're not even guaranteed that you're going to make it to Mars because you never know what could happen from here to Mars. I mean, we've never traveled that far in space.
One of the
with people.
Interesting phenomenon. Let's get back to human nature. In the biosphere experiments, they've actually tried to put human beings in the biosphere and keep them there for a year, because it's going to take, a year by the time they leave Earth and they get established on Mars.
Right.
And you know what? They couldn't last more than 6 months. They were going to kill each other. They had to pull them out.
Yeah.
You can't coop 6 people in the case of the Biosphere 2 experiment.
Are you kidding me? I mean,
human beings, and they were going to kill each other. They demanded to get out of there. And so there's something about human nature that we are really risking a lot by putting, 2, 4, 6 people on a spaceship.
Yeah.
Nobody will be alive when they get there.
You would expect that science or these people would have learned from like the Real World, the TV show.
Yeah.
Don't put people in a group. Big Brother, the TV show. Don't put people in a group and expect them to get along, because it's just we're humans. We find flaws in each other and we argue. That's what we do.
Oh, yeah, nitpick and gossip. I talked to a husband and wife who were members of this team. The 6 in Biosphere 2, and after 6 months they had to be yanked out. And it wasn't that they didn't love each other or anything like that. You just can't stand living together like that.
Who would want to go anyway on a trip like this with your wife and be there for the rest of your lives? What if it doesn't work out and you do break up and now you're
even if
stuck on Mars together?
Girlfriend, it would only last a week, right?
Right. I mean, that can't be good. And could we even make that kind of travel? The human body, could it really travel from here to Mars and be okay? I mean, I don't know if we can survive that space travel.
Okay. I think we have to accept the fact that with the change in gravity, that the human body will change, and if we don't come back, it's going to change permanently, not only for the generation that makes the trip, but for any future generations that are born there, and our bodies will not look on Mars like they look here, because gravity is a factor in why we look the way we do.
Yeah, no kidding. I guess I don't know if they'll get smaller or taller on Mars, because gravity is less there. So
I
taller,
think
right?
we'd get taller. Carl Sagan once speculated, and it stuck in my imagination, that if you were to have intelligent creatures on a planet with a high level of gravity, they'd look like turtles. Whoa,
wow.
That makes sense, right?
Well, why do we have turtles on this planet? I mean,
yeah, what are they doing?
What are they doing here?
Yeah.
That's what's beautiful about this planet. We have such a diverse amount of animals and creatures, and it just makes no sense what we're
I
doing
think
here.
those turtles are actually aliens from Jupiter.
Hey, listen,
Hey, those Ninja Turtles, I'm telling
Michael Bay got into a lot of trouble for saying that the turtles were from space. So let's not go there, because people were angry, Ted. People were mad, and Michael Bay almost lost everything because of one mistake.
Right.
Now, let me ask you: do you think that NASA, or well, not even NASA, but do you think, or do you talk about the ETI myth at all, and how the scientists believe in that myth? Or do scientists believe in the ETI myth, do you think?
Yes, I do, and my science friends don't like me to talk this way, so maybe one of them will call me up and say some nasty things. But a myth is first of all a framework through which we interpret data,
Right.
and then secondly, it can also be a story of origin. And that's what we have in the case of SETI. And the myth looks like this, that there is such a thing as cosmic evolution. Now, Charles Darwin gave us a theory of biological evolution, which did not include the origin of life. It only included how you change from one species to another, hence the book was called Origin of Species. It was not called Origin of Life. But so non-scientifically you can say, well, non-life evolves into life. Okay, I just want to say no empirical evidence for that whatsoever. However, it's part of the ETI myth. So on another planet now, abiotic chemistry evolves into life, and then it gets more and more complicated over time, and over time we get to intelligence, and from intelligence we get to stupid people who believe in religion, and then as
and then we're here.
We evolve further, then we get to smart people who believe in science and technology, and here's the tip-off about the myth, is it's commonly said amongst both SETI and ufology people that if a civilization has evolved longer than it does here on Earth, it is more advanced, it has progressed more, and ergo its science and technology is more advanced than ours, and ergo it has solved many of the problems we are unable to solve. Ergo, if they contact us, they will drop from the sky blessings on top of blessings from their science and technology. And who on earth better than anybody else to make this contact than the most highly evolved, most highly progressed people on earth, namely the scientists in their white coats? And so it's a very self-serving myth, and it goes way beyond scientific evidence. Our most renowned evolutionary biologists, I'm thinking here of Francisco Ayala, Ernst Mayr, Stephen Jay Gould, all agree there is no such thing as progress in evolution. There is no guarantee that no matter how many million years you have evolution going on, that it's going to move towards intelligence, let alone such things as science and technology. And so the ETI myth does not even have the best of our evolutionary biologists giving it support. Yet, this is the myth that justifies the very research that SETI is able to pursue. And last October, I had a chance to talk with SETI. There were about 90 scientists in the room, and I started talking about the assumptions of their research in mythical terms. And oh my goodness, a number of them really took umbrage because they see themselves as scientists and not anyway mythological. And one guy with a big smirk on his face said, well, we have to tell myths. That's the way we get our funding.
Wow.
You know, and I have a funny story that correlates to that, by the way, Ted. When I first got started with the whole ufology thing, and I started doing a radio program 5 years ago, I had a person, I don't want to name this name because I don't want to put them on there like that because they're actually real nice. But there was a lady who told me, you know, what do you want to do in ufology? What are your aspirations in this radio stuff? And I said, to not debunk, but, to get to the bottom of things and maybe learn the truth and, talk to individuals who have experienced stuff. And she was like, well, that's great and dandy, but you're not ever going to make a name for yourself unless you do something beyond the normal. And I'm like, well, short of being abducted, there's really nothing else I could do. I could go to the field with signs and see if somebody comes and takes me, but it's probably not going to happen. But she goes, no, what you need to do is you need to come up with a good storyline, and just sell it, write a couple books, put it out there, do the tours, do the lectures, go around, develop your story over years and make a name for yourself, and this is the way you get into ufology. And I said to myself, so in other words, I got to create a myth, create a story, sell books, and the same thing SETI does. They have to create a myth, sell a fantasy to get their funding, and
Right.
that's what a lot of people in ufology do. They create a myth, create a fantasy to sell their books so they can make a living. And one correlation I've seen, Ted, I don't know if you've seen this yourself, but especially in ufology, and I can name a couple of names, but I don't want to do that. But there's a lot of folks in ufology that are failed musicians. Have you noticed this? Where they failed at music, they jump into ufology for whatever reason.
Right.
They start to hit it off with the people who believe their stuff. Some of them are claiming to be Edgar Casey, for example, in a past life. Who am I talking about here? And they create such a big buzz. Next thing you know, they're telling the world, "Oh, by the way, we're musicians. Yeah, we sucked at it and we made no money, so now we're here. Listen to our records," and they start promoting their records like they're the next Beatles, for example. And then people who already are believers in their nonsense or following them are now looking at their music and they're like, "Well, this is really catchy. It must be good because he's promoted it and we like him." And that's another avenue I think that people are using ufology for, to kind of give themselves a name so they can then sell their other products, which would be a lot of them is music, which is
Yeah.
ironic.
Well, I'm going to write a UFO song now. You've inspired me.
That's just so
Well,
wrong.
actually, I'd like to offer two comments about that. And I think the first one is I don't think there's a lot of money in ufology. As I mentioned, I had interviewed Charles Hickson of the Pascagoula, Mississippi event, and there was a period in which Hickson and Parker were worldwide no household names. Everybody knew of Hickson and Parker and blah blah blah. And a ghostwriter helped Charlie Hickson write a book, and I was in communication with Charlie Hickson for a number of years. He was really disappointed that he didn't make any money. He thought there was gold there, but you know what? There wasn't any gold there.
Well, how long ago was this, though, Ted?
Oh, well, this would be, say, for the incident was 73, so he was probably trying to milk it for profit in the early 1980s, maybe.
There was
somewhere.
no money in that period. Now,
there's
tons of money.
Maybe there is. But the second thing is that I want to say, with regard to SETI scientists and to a lesser extent NASA scientists, I genuinely think they do good science. So if I suggest that there are some mythical dimensions to the set of assumptions with which they take to their research, I don't want to say that their science is faulty because of it. I just want to say they probably think more highly of themselves than they should. But I'm still glad that, as the years go by, they give us more and more valuable data about what's going on in the universe. And even if they never make contact with an intelligent civilization, they will help us know more about the universe. So I don't want to say that just because there are some mythological components that the science is bad, but I do want to say the public ought not to believe everything the scientist says. That's all.
Well, a lot of the SETI stuff is kind of bad because they're still looking in spectrums that we use. Like aliens are going to use radio signals, right? I mean, aliens are evolved supposedly. If they're much more evolved, they're not using the same kind of stuff that we use. It's just not happening.
Yeah, some of the critics make that point. I think in defense of SETI, you might say, "Well, what else are we going to do?" What
Listen,
are our options?
unfortunately, we're almost out of.
As good as any.
No, go ahead.
And listening for radio signals is as good as any option,
Well, yeah, if you want to hear a good broadcast like this one.
Well, I would honestly think if Roswell, if we did retrieve the crash ship from Roswell, we would have been able to figure out what type of way they have communicating through the stars.
Not necessarily. We might not even know how that thing works still today. Alien technology is alien technology, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, though, we're all out of time, Ted, and we have to say goodnight for the evening. I want to give you a chance to tell everybody how to get to you. Give them your link. I know they can find the book UFOs, God's Chariots on Amazon. Please, everybody, get this book. It's a really, really good read. Highly recommended. It's by New Page, and it's a great, great book. But tell everybody your website address, Ted, so everybody can go follow.
Yeah, UFOs, God's Chariots is the book. My website is tedstimelytake.com, and you can buy the book on the website or go directly to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or what have you. But my larger field of interest is the relationship between science and religion, and so if you go to tedstimelytake.com, well, you'll see lots of other goodies there as well. So it's been great talking to you guys.
Ted, it's been an honor.
Us.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Ted, and taking part on the show. Sorry we couldn't get any calls for you, which is weird on Dark Matter Radio. I don't understand what's going on with Dark Matter Radio people. So many people listening, they just sit back and listen. They don't participate.
Nobody wants to talk to you.
I think it's my overpowering voice, Alan. Anyway, guys, we're going to be back next week with Jeff Willis on the show, so please come back and see us, or listen to us, I should say, next week on Skywatchers Radio. Real quick, I want to give a very special shout-out to Raven Xeon and the Zodiac Sun. This is a band whose music we play a lot on the show. In fact, we're going to start playing it now as we go off air. And check out their website. Really, really cool music. Every song these guys put on is always top-notch stuff. Check out their website over on, and I'm going to get you the exact link here, and he sent it to me, and I should have it prepared, but I don't, as usual. Facebook.com/The Zodiac Sun. Check them out, and you can find their stuff on skywatchersradio.com. Also, for our colleague Keith Rowland, for Alan, the co-host here. But guys, come back next week here on Dark Matter Radio Network, and keep listening. There's more stuff on the way.